In July of last year, Cubans took to the streets to protest the Cuban government's repressive laws and actions. In response, the regime detained more than 1,400 protesters and tried hundreds of Cubans from all walks of life, including minors. Rather than addressing the human rights and economic crises that sparked the protests, the Cuban government launched an era of unrelenting crackdowns, charging protesters with sedition, including teenagers, and sentencing them from between 7 to 30 years in prison. But sadly, this represents nothing new in Cuba, where the regime has a long history of arbitrarily detaining anyone who dares to dissent. In Cuba, an unconscionable number of political prisoners have languished in prisons for decades, not just since July of last year. In Nicaragua since 2018, the Ortega Murillo regime has orchestrated a brutal crackdown on human rights in response to widespread opposition to the regime's policies, resulting in the deaths of more than 320 Nicaraguan citizens, including many youth and university students. In the lead up to general elections in November 2021, the regime arbitrarily imprisoned more than 40 opposition figures, including 7 presidential candidates and several prominent independent journalists, rigging the outcome well before Election Day. The Ortega Murillo regime held many of these prisoners incommunicado for months at a time, denied them access to their families and legal representatives. In May, regime-aligned judges concluded show trials for 45 cases, sentencing all to between 8 and 13 years in prison. In Venezuela, too, political prisoners are isolated and denied adequate food and medical care. Prisoners have been tortured by beatings, submersion in water, electric shock, and exposure to cold temperatures. Female prisoners report suffering sexual violence by security forces. The United States, joined by partners and allies across the globe, continues to press for the release of all those unjustly detained for political reasons, an end to human rights abuses, and conditions for free and fair elections that allow Venezuelans, Cubans, and Nicaraguans to choose their leaders for themselves. We remain a steadfast partner of the Venezuelan, Cuban, and Nicaraguan people as they strive to build a better future for their country, one in which their leaders respect the human rights and freedoms of all citizens. The United States will continue